It all started with a difference of philosophy. Soul Reaper and Quincy, both stuck in their ways, to kill and to purify. Either refused to budge. However, the Soul Society had numbers, had power, home field advantage, since they didn't fight in Hueco where the racial concentration is higher. Instead of, they fought in the human world and Soul Society where the race density was lower. And above all else, they had what the Quincy lacked, a vision. The Quincy didn't know what would come of the world after the barrier between Soul Society and the human world broke down. They just knew that it had to be done away with, in their view, or that it was an acceptable sacrifice. But the society knew exactly what it wanted, for things to stay exactly the same. And so, they fought. And so, the Soul Reapers won. First, the war, and then committed atrocities upon the Quincy that went unpunished. But the Quincy waited, deep in the shadows, waiting for the time to strike. And they learned from sad bloodshed. They would not let it go unpunished. Now, as they appear to attack Soul Society for revenge, yes, clad in white, almost like the hollows they forcibly conscript to their armies, but also armed with what they lacked, a true vision, the desire of their almighty king, awoken after a long slumber, all to be entrenched into his black presence, overwhelming. And despite the fact they created weapons from thin air, they are now armed to the teeth. Of course, with their old classics, racist subjugation, Ranso Tengai, Hirin Kyaku, but even their classics bear a new face. The Quincy Last Stayed, a desperation move, surely born out of the desire to take your enemies down with you, is now quite different. Progressing after the genocide of 200 years ago, they seemingly focus it on making their eventual counterattack hurt as much as possible. And the result of that is the Quincy vote standing. Now, it is not only stronger, but has a superior version of racist subjugation, and is also revertible without consequence. From a move that signified their lack of power and desperation, to a move that is a clear sign of their evolution, makes sense its name literally means Quincy completed in German. By bringing reishi into their veins for both attack and defense, they finally have something to match the bodies of Soul Reapers, who have spirit energy vents on their wrists to augment their attacks. And the response of society to all of this is frankly embarrassing. They spent the last 1,000 years trying their hardest to not change at all, after all. And even Aizen and Ichigo, shaking the status quo in their own ways, managed only to extract some concessions. By the end of Fullbring, Soul Society is only willing to selectively uproot its history. And that is a feat, don't get me wrong, it's extremely impressive. Ichigo made them almost ready to throw out all of that bullshit and move forwards in such a short period of time. But almost is not going to cut it against these new Quincy's. Because as much as the Soul Reapers have grown, they still limit themselves to their history, to their teachings. They still uphold their traditions. The biggest one of which is of course that of the Zanpakuto. To this day, they still put the names of all who have achieved such a feat in their libraries with all the fanfare in the world. It is their greatest honor, prerequisite to even being a captain under most circumstances. To devote so much, for so long, to such traditions, the old, the past, makes them prime target from the new, the present, and the future, the Quincy. They would make that past, that legitimacy, that arrogance, that history, that power, and use it to strike back against that very Soul Society. Bankai plunder, the ultimate manifestation of how far the Quincy came since the last war, a symbol of how little society had come. As well, as attack rely on Soul Reapers staying the same beast they were at literal 1,000 years ago. But of course, it worked out, because the society is, first and foremost, committed to being the same. Now, they stand divided, confused, helpless, like children. Like chicken with their heads cut off, running around having their bankai stolen. The children claim for their shepherd. The children scream for a hero. Little do they know both are just more things that Quincy prepared for. The first stern reader to fall, Will G.O.P., gives his life for his duty as His Majesty decreed, and thus condemns society to more and more losses, at least for a time, by keeping Ichigo trapped in the deep dark. Ichigo, their savior, is now trapped in the shadows, just like the Quincy he's going to fight in Cell Society. Ironic, but irony has always escaped Ichigo. He's never been a man for poetry. But he's about to learn the hard way that God is a greater writer of comedy than any man. Thanks for watching. Next episode, episode 5, Out of Bloom, is going to be great. Oh my god.